Okay, to follow up from last week, I mentioned sort of obliquely, that the difference between sustainable and unsustainable training and how all of this ridiculous high volume bullshit gets trotted out, even if it were more effective in the short term, which is questionable when you actually, read past the abstract and stop reading the Instagram bullshit, isn't sustainable in the long term. It's not. It's not meant to be. At best, maybe over a short period of time, it might generate a tiny bit more effect for doing a million times work, but it can't be done long term. And there are 52 weeks in the year the last time I looked. So I asked the internet talking heads again, if you truly believe in the bullshit you're spouting, what do people do the rest of the fucking year? Because my point of all of that video was that in the long term, you're better off keeping it sane, making repeated, albeit maybe a tiny bit less progress per unit time that you can do consistently. You're better off making 5% every 12 weeks or whatever it is, and doing that over and over and over again without getting burnout, without getting hurt, than trying to triple your volume to get 7.5% and then not training for 8 weeks or 8 months. But to follow up on that, I thought I would give some examples of this, because one thing I also mentioned was that there are exceptions. There are times when you have a very specific time-delimited situation to eke the most out of your training possible. And in that one rare exception that doesn't apply to 99.9% of situations, especially not the people these Instagram dipshits are talking to, i.e. you, where you might have to do that. So I thought what might be interesting, and it saves me from having to dredge through my Q&As that I'll deal with right now, I would give 4 examples of training that I have personally done over my ungodly long career till I retired at 42, which has nothing to do with the life, the universe, or anything, lol, to show you some differences between unsustainable training that were used for very specific reasons for very short terms and long-term sustainable training. And for each, I'm going to give the context that these programs were being used for, because that will hopefully make you understand what informed my choice to do this either crazy-ass or uncrazy-ass stuff. And then once again, I'm going to plug Sumi's book, which you should buy if you haven't already, but I'll get to that at the end. All right, let's start with unsustainable example number 1. So let's look at unsustainable training example number 1, which I call crazy-ass aerobic training. So the context on this was, in my early 30s, having focused predominantly on the weight room, and I had done a powerlifting competition that I actually did, decent, given that I wasn't particularly geared towards it. I did double body weight squat, body weight and a half bench, triple 2.5 times body weight deadlift. Not shoddy. I realized that as much as I loved the weight room, and I still, at the time, I always loved pushing big iron, even if I wasn't great at it, that I should go back to inline skating, which I had retired from years before that because I had burnt out and overtrained. Because I liked competing, I liked having a goal, and frankly, it's what I was better at. So I decided to go back. Now I was coming out of years of not having done like any formal aerobic work. And I wanted to get my aerobic fitness back as quickly as possible. So I was aware of this weird paper back from 1977, done by Hickson, who would later do actually a lot of the interference work. And the gist of it, and I'll give the reference here in a second, was that it was normally assumed that it took years for high-level athletes to develop their VO2 max, which is a measure of performance, and all of that. And he questioned that. He said, is it possible that we can get there a lot faster? And he developed what he called a strenuous aerobic training program and threw a bunch of beginners into the fucking grinder. But the long and the short of it was that they achieved VO2 max levels that were close to the elites at the time in 6 weeks or something roughly along those lines. But they had to fucking suffer to do it. So after I built up a little bit of a base, I decided I was going to do that program basically as written. And here's what it looked like. So what you can see is that it's a 6-day-per-week program, alternating cycling Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and running Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'm not sure that I ran because I was terrible at it. I might have ridden the bike again, but no matter. And it alternated 2 types of workouts. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you did what are called VO2 max intervals, which at the time were done by doing 6 by 5 minutes, all out at a VO2 max intensity with a 2-minute break after warm-up and then followed by cool down. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you would do 40 minutes at lactate threshold, basically as hard as you could go. And you did that for 6 days a week, and then they had you retest VO2 max on Sunday to reset the wattages. I didn't do that. That was the training program, and it was brutal. 6 days a week. Every day was hard. Those VO2 max intervals are brutal because the 5 minutes feel like you're dying and the 2 minutes goes by in no time whatsoever. And I just simply tried to increase the power output on the bike, I think, weekly. Now, this is unsustainable. In the study, most people were done at 6 weeks. And actually, after the study was done, when given the opportunity, they all fucking quit. Because this is brutal. Every workout is all out. Now, I modified it a couple ways. One is that in week 3, because I wasn't untrained going into it, I had built a bit of an aerobic base. The folks in the original study were untrained. There was actually a follow-up to it in trained individuals where it didn't work quite as well. So in week 3, halfway through, I dropped the Friday, Saturday workout to give myself a tiny bit of recovery. And then I ground through the rest of it. And then that was it. And I went right back to standard aerobic training. And if I was doing anything else at the time, I don't remember, because it was too many years ago, and I think I've blocked out the memory of such a horror show of training. I might have been doing some technical skate training in the evenings, but that was it. So that's unsustainable program number 1. High frequency, high intensity, although not high impact, right? 3 days a week on the bike saves the joints. And like I said, I don't recall if I ran. They did in the study. But then that was it. I set it for 6 weeks. I took a break at week 3, and then I moved back into sane training because I knew that not only would it provide no further benefits in terms of making progress in VO2 max, that it would eventually break me. So I set it up exactly like that. All right, example number 2. So at some point following that, again, I was still training, wanting to return to inline skating, which is always ever good at in my 20s, racing predominantly at the 10K distance. So I was redeveloping my skating, doing what I thought were technical drills based on a bunch of books I had. Like, there was not a lot of information even then. And as I looked into it, I realized that the race circuit had changed and that basically there were no 10K events being held because they weren't worth it. A 10K on inlines takes about between 16 and 20 minutes. So it wasn't worth it for race promoters to even bother putting them on. Right? It's not like running 10Ks where you get 10,000 people and can make a shed load of money. Like inline, they just didn't have the numbers, and pros didn't want to fucking travel hours either direction to race for 15 minutes. So everything had moved to the marathon distance. And it was a true marathon, which was 42 kilometers, 26.2 miles. I had done one in college on non-racing skates. It was awful. It was a terrible, terrible experience. And I thought my feet were going to fall off. And I didn't want to race marathons because, look, driving 26 miles is awful. I sure as fuck didn't want to skate it. So for years, I had wanted to try ice speed skating. It had always been kind of a dream, although I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. And I mentioned, there's in the previous video, there weren't a lot of facilities. Although by this point, the U.S. had the Pettit Center in the Wisconsin basin, a cold, drafty warehouse that I'd nearly frozen my ass off one year when I went to watch Nationals in the middle of December, thinking that blue jeans and a leather jacket would keep me warm. But at this point, they had Salt Lake City, which was a climate-controlled indoor oval. And I was looking around, and they had a summer intro to ice speed skating camp. And I was doing very little here in Austin, training my 2 powerlifters at the time, and I thought, fuck it, I should go. Right? It was a 3-day camp. Brian Haycock, who most of you don't remember, lived in Salt Lake, so I'd get to say hi to him. I thought, at least I can say I tried the ice. So I flew up there, did 3 days of ice training, and I was absolutely terrible at it. I'd ice skated like once in my life. Honestly, the coaching wasn't great. We did a bunch of different stuff. We did some technical stuff and, took us into the weight room, and I was horrified at what they were having the other people do. Because what was actually funny, right? I was thinking, there's going to be a bunch of folks like me. I'm this 35-year-old dude. Basically, Salt Lake City parents used it as daycare. So it was me and a bunch of little kids. I've got gray hair in my beard, and these kids are there just having fun. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. The national team is on the ice training, and here's me. I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm here to have fun. I'm here to do what I'm going to do. I didn't give a shit. I was there to try the ice and enjoy it, and I did. And I flew back to Austin, having picked up Derek Parra's wonderful book, Reflections in the Ice, and it inspired me because he had been an inline skater, admittedly a lot better than I ever was, and made the switch to ice relatively late in his life, and he reached the top. By which I mean he won a gold medal and set a world record in the 1,500 meter in the Salt Lake City Olympics. And just as an interesting note, he was the first Hispanic American to ever win a winter gold medal, or I think a winter medal of all. But in any case, that inspired me. And I sat and thought about it and thought about it and thought, well, I'm not doing much in Austin. Again, coaching my two female powerlifters, that was all that was really holding me here. I've always wanted to try the ice. Olympic trials are in a year and a half. Fuck it, let's go. And I would shortly thereafter pack my car and drive to Salt Lake City. If you want the details of that, there's an article series on my website called No Regrets, where I wrote about that horrific, it turned into a 5.5-year experience. Regardless, what I realized is that outdoor inline, which is what I had always skated and raced, and ice speed skating, as similar as they are, might as well be two different sports. Outdoor inline is aerobic. You skate at a very high knee angle. It's mostly straight lines. Not a lot of corners at that distance. And the ice, which is on a 400-meter ice oval, is anaerobic, all corners, and requires a ton more leg strength. And this is a problem because, geared towards inline, is one of the brief periods of my life I was not lifting weights. I was aerobically fit. I had enough strength for aerobic inline. I didn't have the leg strength for the ice. And I had 6 weeks to remedy that. So I set up crazy-ass unsustainable training program number 2, which I've outlined in next. So this is legitimately the crazy-ass training I think I've ever done in my life. So I trained 6 days a week, and Sundays, thank God, I took off. I decided to lift Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and I was doing a jumping program on Wednesday and Saturday, and I'll detail those in a second. I had been doing a lot of aerobic training, so I moved that to maintenance. So I did 3 aerobic maintenance workouts. And in between those, I did the technical drills, such as they were, and I think some skating. And in the evening, I did what I call GPP, because since Derek Parra had done a lot of work in a weight vest, I got a weight vest, and I would walk an hour outside in Austin on uneven ground, because I needed something to do, and it actually had the consequence of making my ankles very stable in hindsight. So already you can see from the overview, it's crazy, but it got worse, because I made each of those 4 weight workouts full body, meaning I trained legs every single day. Now remember, I was coming from rank beginner again. I had been strong, but I was not strong at the time, so I was starting with the fucking bar, right? So Monday, Thursday, I would do back squats, I think 5x5, followed by RDL, 5x5. Horizontal push, horizontal pull, abs and low back. On Tuesday, Thursday, I would do front squat, 3x3. I think leg curls, 3x8. It's been a lot of years. Vertical push, vertical pull, abs, low back. And then on Wednesday, Saturday, I would do 2 hours of jumping, of skate-relevant jumping from very low-intensity ankle hops to extremely high-intensity one-leg jumps. So that's the overall program. And it was fucking crazy. Which is just a way of saying that I was doing high-frequency weight training way before it was cool. Now again, I was starting from scratch. I was starting with the bar on back squats and RDLs and front squats. But by doing high frequency, basically I was regaining my strength, right? So it wasn't like these were all out maximum workouts, but by Saturday my legs were burned, right? Back squat Monday, Thursday, front squat Tuesday, Friday, that 2-hour jumping workout. By Sunday, I was ready to collapse. Now, I had another advantage, which is that in premise I know what I'm doing in the weight room. And I dare say the results I've gotten in people prove that. My people even get a tan when they do photo shoots, and they do that right. I digress. Which means that during my training, I was doing quite a bit of auto-regulating. Again, way before it was cool, right? So if I went in for back squats and I was still a little bit tired, I would just get the volume, and I'd do 5x5 across. But if I felt good, I'd pyramid up to a PR, and then that would be my starting weight at the next workout. Same thing with front squats with RDLs. Like I had, even then, 20 years of experience in the weight room. And I was, in as much as you can listen to your body, if I felt good, I went heavier. And if I felt like shit, I would just get the volume and do the work. And basically, my strength increased linearly over that 6-week span. As well, just like with that crazy aerobic training, at week 3, I took Friday and Saturday off. Like, I knew full well that I was going to be on the breaking point, and that I needed a couple of extra days to get my legs to freshen up, and I could then finish it out. And I actually got to Salt Lake with like 1 week of that shit left, and my coach, when I got him, said, look, you need to knock this off, because it was going to interfere with my technical training. I said, look, I'm going to max that on Saturday, and then I'll drop all this shit. And over that 6-week span, I got to something like 80% of my previous best. But again, strictly time delimited. I set it up as a 6-week program and no more. Even if I'd still been making progress, I would have ended it. Because I know, at that point, I knew exactly about the point that my own body will break. Now at 54, I'm just perpetually broken, but that's a whole separate thing. And again, in week 3, I took a couple days off. So, a crazy-ass program. The kind of program that I shit on several videos ago. Because in the long term, it breaks you. It does. It does. Again, it would have also been different if I'd been maxing out at every workout, which I wasn't. I mean, the jumping was brutal, but 2 hours, only the last 4 or 5 exercises were really that hard, to be quite honest with you. So there's another example. And notice a trend. 6 weeks for the crazy-ass aerobic training, 6 weeks for this insane bullshit. That's about what I could sustain. And anything more would have broken me. And when you break and get injured, you make less progress. So there's 2 unsustainable programs. Then when I got to Salt Lake, my coach, who'd been coaching for longer than I have, actually, at that point, he'd been training skaters for 27 years. We're very much on the same wavelength. Keep it sane. Keep the volumes under control. Don't blow up your athletes. Technique before all. Quality more than quantity. He had a very sustainable training program because he had seen what happens. When he'd been an athlete, he trained 7 days a week, 3 times a day, year round. Now, a lot of it's non-impact. A lot of bike riding, skating is not impact, but he was brutally overtrained. When he finally burnt himself out after making Olympic trials, he took like 2 years off and came back with a few weeks of training, skated PRs. It probably took him that long to recover. And I'd say supercompensate, but supercompensation is not a thing. Topic for another video. So anyway, I want to lay out what he had us do that was eminently sustainable. So I mentioned in a previous video that ice speed skating is really screwy in that for the grand majority of the time, and even still now, you don't have access to the ice. So you actually have about half the year where you're not on the ice and you're having to do whatever you can do to get in shape. So the first program I want to look at was my coach's summer inline dry land program, which is very typical of what skaters did in the sense of the types of training that they did, although I think we did probably a lot less with higher quality. Now, one thing you'll notice about this training program and the next one is that we actually trained 4 days a week. But on those days, we trained twice a day. And the reason for that was that skating is insanely technical. And when you're starting late in life, you cannot practice technique tired. So my coach had found that rather than training every day and having your legs get worked every day, it was better to train twice a day, less frequently. And you'll also notice as I lay this out that, A, we always did skate stuff first. Because again, you cannot practice technique tired. You cannot improve technique tired. So we had an earlier workout in the day and a later workout in the day. With the later workout being the donkey work that I described and defined for y'all at the last video. And the later workout always sort of complemented the earlier workout in terms of what its physiological demands were, and this will make a little more sense as I lay this out. So like you said, you can see that we trained 4 days a week. On Mondays, we did what's called dry land training, and then an evening bike ride. Wednesday, we did inline, and then evening weights. Friday was dry land again, bike aerobic. And then Saturday was inline again, and then an evening weight workout. So dry land is these weird skate imitations skaters had to come up with because they didn't have access to the ice. And early on, they didn't have a lot of inline. They didn't have inline skates that were worth a shit. So it would be something like an off-skate warm-up, some various drills. We did low-volume jumping, by which I mean maybe 4 or 5 exercises tops for 2 sets, either for reps or, we'd bound for distance. things like that. Low volume, high quality, and then we would do skate imitations. They're hard to explain, but it was done sort of in a continuous fashion to build some aerobic fitness. So you do these skate things, and we might do a 5-minute interval and start with 1 minute of the imitation, then 4 minutes spinning on the bike, and do 30 minutes total of that. And then over time, we would do longer of the skate imitations, still in a 5-minute interval, and then that might build up to an hour. And again, that was Monday, Friday. And then bike, 60 minutes, zone 2, just to build basic aerobic fitness. Wednesday, inline workout, morning, and then evening weights. So inline, we do all skate warm-ups on this horror show called Turntable, which is to mimic turn mechanics with a special stretchy band that, if you're unlucky, snaps and claps you in the balls. Then we get our skates, on-skate warm-up, drills. We would set up a circle with skate wheels, and we would do timed crossovers for corners, and then a workout called lap on, lap off, where we would do skate a full lap, usually with a full circle with a goal time, and then coast a lap, and then do that for as long as we could stand it or my coach wanted us to, and be like 20 minutes to start and be like 60 minutes in the end. And then our weight workout was very simple. Leg press, leg curl, something for chest and back, abs, low back, and we would do 2 weeks apiece at 25, 15, 12, 10, 8 reps, 2 sets maximum per exercise. Very low volume, very high quality. So given the limitations of summer training, that's what we did. We had 4 skate-related workouts, always done in the morning when our legs were fresh for technique. Then we had 2 bike rides to build aerobic fitness, because it's very hard to build on skates, especially if you're skating. If you're skating appropriately for the ice, and again, separate video. And then the most basic weight program you've ever seen. Because my coach was not strong in the weight room in terms of technically, he wasn't supervising us, which is important. And he didn't have the time or the energy to teach complex exercises. And the simple fact is that for all but powerlifting and Olympic lifting, the weight room is GPP. He needed to get our legs strong to be able to skate, period. And you can do that a lot faster, a lot more simply with basic machine stuff. We also, early on, we did the multi-hip, and I'm not going to get into this is just to kind of sketch this out. But this was very sustainable. Lots of time off. The workouts weren't that high intensity, although they got harder. I didn't outline his periodization. We would do 2 12-week blocks over our 6 months of summer training. We would start very gradually, coming out of our 2 weeks off at the end of the last season. And we build up very gradually in terms of intensity, volumes, durations. My coach did not use those 3 on, 3 up and then 1 easy. He had done that early in his career, and the problem is it breaks people. People forget that came out of German oral Turinabol cycles, and the Russians want to send their kids home. In a highly technical sport, unless you are incredibly skilled, that shit doesn't work. Yeah, it works in powerlifting, because powerlifting is not a highly technical sport. But in this, what he found was that by week 3, everyone looked like shit on their skates. And then in week 4, they still looked like shit on their skates. So he was getting 2 good weeks of training out of 4, so he knocked that shit off. He did what is typically, I've seen referred to as the model of Olzolan, periodization model, that just sort of gradually builds up. He would apply his coach's eye when he saw that we were ready to increase the duration of the workout, the number of lap on, lap off laps that we did, the duration of the dryland workout, the distance on the turntable. He applied his coaching experience, because he was there every day with us, coached versus uncoached training. It's all tying together, isn't it? To build up gradually so that our fitness improved. We never got burnt out. We didn't get hurt. We didn't get exhausted. And we'd build up to a peak in 12 weeks. And then the second 12 weeks, it would be a little more intensive. I'm not going to, again, detail all of this. This is to give sort of an example. So this was eminently sustainable training, meant to build our fitness over 2 12-week blocks to prepare us to get onto the ice, which is what I'll talk about to wrap this shit up. It won't surprise you to see that our ice training was very similarly structured. It was simply we were on the ice instead of having to fuck about on inlines and with this exhausting dryland training. So again, here was the basic approach, and you'll see that it's very similar. It's a very similar structure, again, 4 days a week with 2 workouts on each day. Monday, interval endurance, and then in the evening, bike intervals to kind of match physiologically. Wednesday, we would do sprint training after a day off, so our legs were fresh, followed by light power weights. Thursday, ice endurance for laps, and then an aerobic bike ride. And then Saturday would either be more sprint training or time trials, races such as they were. and then followed by heavy maintenance weights in the evening. So typical interval endurance workout on Monday, off-ice warm-up, drills, warm-up laps, lap on, lap off, just like on inline, at gradually increasing lap speeds and number of total laps, or what's called tempo, which is an all-out set of anywhere between 3 and 12 laps, depending on which distance you're trying to mimic. Then a cool down. Bike intervals, warm-ups. We would start with short intervals to mimic the shorter races and build up over time to about 8 minutes. Wednesday, sprint training, off-ice warm-up drills, low-volume jumping, warm-up laps. Starts 250s with little kids called candy canes to start working on speed, and then 4x400 meters all out with a 10-minute rest interval. And then a cool down. Weights, same basic workout. Light power, 60-75%. Just keep it quick and snappy. Again, 2 sets maximum per exercise. Thursday, endurance workout on the ice. Warm-up drills, warm-up laps, 250s, and then 2 longer sets of laps. More special endurance if you're familiar with track cycling. With a full rest and then a cool down. Maintenance bike ride. And then Saturday would be more sprint training, just like the Wednesday workout, or if we had races, time trials, we would do those. And then maintenance, heavy weights, in as much as we were really worrying about it. Again, same basic goal. He wanted to keep us fresh for technical work. Sprint training was always done after a day off, so you can't train maximum speed with good technique if you're tired. The double workouts, again, to give us more total days off. And then matching the workouts in any given day. If you're wondering why, some days it was an afternoon ice and then evening workout, it had to do with qualifying times for morning ice. Saturday, we all had access to morning ice, so we could actually have a decent break between workouts. And same sort of thing. We would do sort of 2 12-week cycles, starting gradually, building up over time. He would increase the workload gradually based on his coach's eye, because he was there coaching us. He never buried us in volume. He never buried us in intensity, so that we could keep improving. And we all kept kind of just getting faster until the end of the season finale. Whereas all the other teams, the national team and stuff like that, they were buried in volume. They were skating badly and slowly and hopefully tapering in time for their events. So again, that was a very sustainable program. Even with that, about every 11 and a half weeks, I would take 5 days and fuck off, because I would start to get on the edge of overtraining, and I would something I pulled from Charlie Francis to freshen up. Lost no fitness, never did it on a time trials weekend, obviously, in as much as it, again, too much time to explain. And that was a very sustainable training program. And we did that for 5.5 years. And actually the one time I broke was the last season, where I added a 5th day of training on short track, and that's when my legs broke. So there's maybe a lesson there. Maybe you can see how those examples sort of try together everything I've been babbling about for the last 17 months or however many videos of these things that I've done, which is, if you're going to go high intensity, high frequency, like I did in that crazy-ass bike workout and the crazy-ass skate, it has to be very time-delimited. And it has to have a specific goal. Those programs were aimed at developing the most fitness in the shortest amount of time for very specific goals, but I time-delimited them and used those to move into saner training, because otherwise they would have broken me. And then on the ice, my coach, he was very, very smart, and I actually learned quite a bit from him, even despite my experience. Because, like I said, he had 2.5 decades training skaters, and who the fuck was I to say? I had thoughts about our training several years in and made slight adjustments, but we trained 4 days a week. We trained double days. We had lots of days off. No, ice speed skating is all high intensity. Cannot do low intensity training on the ice. We were always fresh. We had to be, because we were older and still developing technique. Generally, he trained, that's who we worked with. National team skaters, the short track especially, were buried in volume and dragging their asses around all the time. And we just kept getting faster throughout the year, and they didn't. So maybe there's a lesson in that when you listen to all this high volume, high intensity, high frequency, Bulgarian this bull fucking shit, and then look at what you have to do all year. And as a final example, right next to final example, many of you may be aware that a American female just won a gold medal in Olympic weightlifting. And there's a podcast, I'll put a link to it in the notes. It's very short, where she talks about how she approached her training and what she did. She trains 4 days a week. 4! She keeps it high quality, so she stays fresh, so her technique stays good, so she can execute with quality training. And it took her to the highest level of the sport. For all of y'all who think that Smolov and Shako and high frequency and 52 sets and all of this ignorant bullshit that's promoted by these Instagram talking heads is necessary, I want you to consider that. Because I guarantee you she outsquats all of you. And she won a gold medal training 4 days a week and keeping the quality high and executing in perfect technique, because that's sustainable and can be done year round. She didn't bump anything up for the Olympics because that's where people fuck themselves. In Olympic year, they're like, we got to train twice as hard and higher intensity, and they fuck themselves up. You dance with who brung you. And as a final note, and maybe at some point I'll outline her training, that's how I trained Sumi for the 8 years of her career. Sustainable 13-week cycles, gradually progressing, very similar to what my coach did with me. When my coach's eye told me it was time for her to add weight to the bar because her technique was solid, because her quality was solid, because she was executing at a high technical standard. I never wiped her out. I never wrecked her. She never got hurt. She never got burnt out. And all she had to do at competition was go and do exactly what she'd done every day in the weight room, 6 days a week for the previous 13-week cycle. And that took her to the highest level of her sport. And maybe for all of you people still fascinated by all this high-frequency bullshit and high-volume bullshit, might think about that, because there might be a lesson. Other than stop listening to Instagram morons. This moron accepted. You can listen to me. See you next time. Since I keep bringing her up, I wanted to announce that my trainee Sumi Singh has a new book out titled Becoming a Mentally Tough Motherfucker. How Elite Powerlifting Made Me a Better Person, Parent, and Partner, with both a foreword and epilogue by yours truly, which is a guide to all of the mental training skills she developed over the 8 years of her incredible elite powerlifting career. Topics include goal setting, dealing with resistance, setbacks, failures, journaling, anxiety on the big day if you do compete or have some sort of big demonstration or event, and also what to do when you choke, among many, many, many other things. The book has finally been published and is available on Amazon for Kindle purchase right now. If you are in a different country, you will have to go to your specific Amazon and search on her name, which is Sumi Singh, Sumisingh. You will not be able to get it from Amazon.com unless you're in the United States for Amazon reasons. You do not have to have a Kindle to get it. You need some sort of Kindle reader, and Amazon does have a cloud Kindle reader to read it on the website. So if you don't have the device, don't worry about it. If you prefer physical books, because you're an old fart like me, you can buy it in hard copy form as well on Amazon, and I'll put the links in the video notes. Buy it now, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everyone, and maybe consider sending a gift copy to Mike Israetel, because he needs help becoming mentally tough. Buy Sumi's book. You won't regret it. For the record, I neither read nor respond to comments on YouTube or Instagram, because I don't care. Mind you, I don't delete comments I don't like most of the weak-minded babies in this industry either. If you think my content is great and want to tell me how awesome I am, fantastic. If you think I'm a dumb asshole and want to call me names, also fantastic. I don't care either way, because I have better things to do. If you have questions that you want me to potentially read and or respond to, or most likely ignore, send them to questions@bodyrecomposition.com. Might get to them, might not. It's part of my charm. Oh yeah, I recently added a playlist to my channel, my buddy Solomon Nelson, who does some fantastic videos taking down the cretins in this industry. I've put the link directly to that playlist in the video comments, and you can also find them however you find playlists. He deserves the exposure. Go check him out.